This episode of the DBR podcast is brought to you by the fine gentlemen of Byrd Campbell, your Duke-centric law firm, offices in Texas and Florida. If you have any legal needs, we urge you to reach out to our fine sponsors and a pair of great Dukies. Byrd Campbell means business. Duke fans, welcome to the DBR podcast, episode number 122. 122 of these babies in the book. I am Jason Evans. I am your host this week. I am joined, as always, by my wonderful partners in crime. First of all, in Durham, North Carolina, Sam Klein.
Hello, good evening. Tomorrow is the first day of orientation. By the time you listen to this, I will officially be a Duke student again. So, hooray!
You'll be oriented.
It apparently takes 3 days to fully orient a full-time business school student. So I won't be fully oriented until Friday afternoon.
Gotcha.
In the meantime, watch out.
Yes, and congratulations, by the way. Fuqua is a fabulous business school, and they are getting a fabulous guy in you. So congrats.
Well, I appreciate you thinking that and also expressing it to me publicly because doubt creeps up in all of our minds.
No, it should not creep into yours. You are on your way to a great career in business. Donald Wine. Donald, you in Washington, or have you gone to some other far-off hinterland? Need I remind folks that last week Donald was at a bar in Utah.
I am back in D.C., and I actually thought about tonight finding a bar in D.C. and mimicking my performance from last week. But I just couldn't do it justice. So we're just going to leave that one in the past and let it stand in the history that it consumes.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, we have a really special treat for the audience tonight. I mentioned that this is podcast number 122. We made a mistake. We should have done this for podcast number 121 because we're about to interview a man who wore number 21 for the Duke Blue Devils, and I believe he wore it better than anyone in Duke history. Other number 21s that didn't wear it better are legends like Jay Billis, Chris Duhon, Robert Brickey, Emil Jefferson, Antonio Lang, DeMarcus Nelson, Miles Plumlee. They all wore number 21, but the best ever number 21 for Duke is none other than Trajan Langdon. Trajan Langdon finished his career just 26 points shy of 2,000. He was a second-team All-American as a junior, first-team All-American as a senior. I believe he is the best outside shooter in Duke history, not named J.J. Redick. This is a guy who hit 86% of his free throws in his career. He is fourth in the ACC in career three-point field goals, seventh in the ACC history in three-point field goal percentage, hit almost 43% of his threes for in his career. He held the record for the most three-pointers in Duke history until JJ broke it. Three-time first-team All-ACC and a smart guy who was a three-time ACC academic All-American. I've given you lots of background, but I want to give you a little bit more. Trajan Langdon played the NBA for a few years, but then went to Europe, and this guy had one of the most successful careers in Euroleague history. Spent most of his career with CSKA Moscow, where he won 9 straight Russian League titles and 2 Euroleague titles, and 1 year he was MVP of the Euroleague Final Four. He is the 6th leading scorer in Euroleague history. And since retiring, I mentioned that Trajan was a 3-time ACC academic All-American. Since retiring, he has moved into management in the NBA, and he's currently the assistant general manager of the Brooklyn Nets. And he will be a GM someday, mark my words, because he was one of the finalists for the Pistons job this summer. Lots of talk he was going to get the Pistons job. He didn't, but believe me, this guy's going to be everyone in the NBA respects him. Trajan Langdon will be a Dookie GM in the NBA someday soon. So you're about to hear our interview with him. Donald and I got to sit down. We talked to him a lot about Duke. We talked to him a lot about the NBA, but I want to point out one thing before we get to the interview. Because Trajan is an NBA assistant GM, there are some things he could not talk about. It would be tampering if he talked about current NBA players or current college players. So we're somewhat limited in talking about some of these things. And there may be some questions you go, how could they not ask him about this? Well, we couldn't ask him about that because it would have been against the rules for him to talk about it. But he talked about a ton of other stuff. It's a great interview. I know you guys are going to enjoy it. One of my favorite Dukies of all time. Here's our interview with Trajan Langdon. So the DBR podcast is thrilled and excited to be joined by one of my favorite Dukies of all time, a guy who I always loved watching play, the Alaskan Assassin, Trajan Langdon. Trajan, one of the great shooters in Duke and NCAA history. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, and look forward to having some fun here.
Yeah. So here's the way it's going to work, my man. I am going to talk to you first about Duke and your time at Duke and that incredible career you had. And then Donald's going to come in, and Donald's going to talk to you a little bit about your post-Duke career, which was also incredible and currently has you as the assistant general manager of the Nets. So you know a good deal about the NBA. We're going to be chatting with you about that. But we're going to start with your time at Duke. And I want to start with the 1999 team. I want you to know I was despondent when you guys lost the final game your senior year. Fans, folks, I don't think people remember how great that 1999 team was. You put a vicious beatdown on virtually everyone that you guys played. I remember you played number 4 ranked Maryland. At Maryland, you beat them by 18. You played number 14 ranked UNC. At UNC, you beat them by 22. You won the ACC tournament by an average of 23 points a game. You were undefeated in the ACC. There were only 5 games all year that you guys didn't win by 10 or more points. 37-1 going to the national title game. And then we lost the national title to UConn. Trajan, can I ask you, are you like me? Do you think you guys would have won 9 out of 10 times against that UConn team? It was a great UConn team, but 1999, y'all were one of the greatest teams in college basketball history, weren't you?
I think so. It was a remarkable year, and there's one game to me that really stands out, and it was, it probably doesn't to a lot of people, but I remember playing UVA at UVA, and I can't remember. I think it was later in the ACC season, maybe 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through, and wasn't looking at the score. It was one of those games where, for us, that was one of the more difficult places to play that we had played, and we knew UVA wasn't great, but they were competitive in their home court. So we went in and we were just playing hard, and I don't remember looking up at the scoreboard once. And then I remember coming out of the game with about 10 minutes left, and I'm looking at the assistant coaches like, am I done? Like, why are you taking me out? And they're like, yeah, looking at me crazy. And I look up and we're up like 50. And I'm just like, what? We are winning by like 45 points in this arena. And I remember going into the locker room after, and it was, me and Quinn Snyder and Johnny Dawkins are talking. We're just like, man, this team is pretty good. That we just put a hurting on this team. It was actually pretty, not one of the better teams in the ACC, but they were competitive at home and had played some good teams pretty tough. And obviously we blew them out that day. So the finish to that season was
I looked it up.
Difficult.
You guys beat them 100-54. 100-54. That doesn't happen. And that was at
Exactly.
UVA. Oh my God.
At
yeah.
UVA.
So talk about the end of the season.
But the end of the season was tough, and like you said, we kind of, I wouldn't say we cruised through, but we put a beating on a lot of teams, and it was fun. It was a fun group to be with and just to practice with and against every day, because we had a lot of talent, and practices were super competitive, and obviously that carried over into games where we were competitive and just would come ready to play every game. And to come up short that last game was we knew we were playing against a very good team. We had played against a good Michigan State team in the semifinal, so we felt it prepared us to be focused and be ready. And they came out and they were better than us on that night. And but I don't. You said 9 out of 10. I would probably say 7 or 8 times out of 10. I think we beat that team. But give them credit; they were better on that night. But we had a really special team, and it's just sad that we came up one game short.
You are always the gentleman. Can I ask, and I promise this is the last question I'll ask about that game. Final play, 5.4 seconds left. The ball's in your hands, and we're down 1 point. Do you replay that in your sleep, like all the time?
That's not the play that I replay. The play that I replay is the one where I got called for traveling, where I went left on Ricky Moore, spun to the middle, and getting ready to go up for a little floater, and they called a travel. And, whether it's here or there, I probably got bumped on the spin, and whether I, kind of had a hiccup in the little pivot, who knows? But it's just like, come on, man, really, you're going to call that at this time in the game? Like, it wasn't like I got that much of an advantage and I did get bumped. So that's the one I replay because the ref made a huge play in the game, and it wasn't about the player. It was about the ref in that situation, because I don't think it was that, if that call, if you didn't call that call, it's not like people were going to say anything. So me getting tripped up a little bit and not being able to get that shot off is frustrating, but, the no travel call that should have been, the travel call that should have been a no travel is the one that plays back in my mind.
Okay, so let's put the bad memories aside. What's your favorite memory of your time at Duke? Is there like any one teammate that you go, that guy always made me smile?
Chris Carrawell was a hilarious guy. We're still pretty close to this day, and he's a guy that always makes me laugh when we get together. He loves to talk hoops. So we talk family a little bit, but in the end of the day, whether it's phone conversation or breakfast or dinner or just in the gym, it always comes down to, personnel at the college or the NBA level, and who we like, who we don't like, who's overpaid, underpaid, who are the players that are panning out. And it's always fun to talk basketball with him. It's always great running across guys like Wojo, Jeff Capel, Shane Battier, Elton Brand, and as Shane and Elton have worked their way up the ranks in their respective organizations, it's been good seeing them on the road and talking about what's going on around the league as well. So all good guys, and I was blessed to be teammates with. So my time at Duke, my 4 or 5 years there were tremendous, and learned a lot and got to be around a lot of good people.
Well, and yeah, there are a tremendous number of you who are in NBA front offices or coaching at the college level. I mean, Carrawell, Chris Burgess. It's a very, very tight fraternity. Do you guys all stay in touch?
I think it's here and there. It comes in waves. Obviously, when Coach K has his Coach K Academy back in, I guess it's May and June, and a lot of us get to come back and get together. It's a time to reconnect with a lot of guys that maybe you haven't seen in a few years, or in some cases several years. So that's a great thing that Coach does. Other than that, it's here and there. Like Mike Dunleavy, I talked to on the phone the other day. He's looking to get into some stuff post-career, maybe into scouting. And then, guys I'll stay in more close touch with, like Jeff Capel or Wojo, Chris Collins. Those are the guys, Shane, the guys that you played with are guys that you stay in a little bit closer touch with, obviously.
Now, talking about your career at Duke, I always thought, to me, you had one of the really unique experiences at Duke, because your freshman year, you guys were 13 and 18. You all just couldn't win any close games. And a lot of people would say that during the, Coach K era, this is the lowest point. And then from there, you're really the guy. You're the senior who leads us to the heights of 1999. Was it so much more satisfying? Was 99 more satisfying because of the depths of the lows that you guys had in that first season?
Oh, 100%. And I think even more to that story is, if you remember, the year before I came in was Grant Hill's senior year, and they were one shot away from winning the national championship. So I remember Ricky Price, myself, and Wojo being in a room up in College Park, Maryland, a couple of days before we played in the Cap Classic, watching the game. I can't remember if Ricky was there. It might have been just myself and Wojo. And obviously cheering for Duke, and we come up one shot short, and, we didn't talk about it, but of course we're thinking we want to go to a couple of these when we're in our 4 years. And then, fast forward 1 year, and we're not even playing in the postseason tournament. We've had the worst year in Duke history, at least with Coach K. And, it was a completely different feel. And so then, it was an uphill battle and a challenge getting back to where Duke had been. So to actually get back to that Final Four and reach a championship, which was, Final Four was the goal, and obviously winning a championship was a dream. And to get that close to achieving both was, obviously something that was tremendous for me, and a tremendous accomplishment over the 5 years that I was there, to actually be a part of a Duke team that got us back to that point.
So for young Duke fans, those who don't have memories as long as mine, we're giving them a lot of history here. I want to give them a little more history. There are probably people who don't recall that you were a two-sport star, not just basketball, but you played minor league baseball for the San Diego Padres. You were a fairly high draft pick of the Padres organization. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, the Padres paid for your college education. Duke didn't have to pay for your scholarship. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Duke helped in the fifth year because the first 4 years San Diego paid for it, but then because I was then not under contract anymore, they could pay for my fifth year.
So Trajan, I think that technically makes you the greatest walk-on in Duke history because you didn't have a scholarship. Let me ask, what ball over baseball, and what was it like to play both those sports at such a high level at the same time?
You know, I think when I got drafted back in, I guess, spring of 1994, I knew that if I went to Duke, I wouldn't have an opportunity to play baseball. And I knew the whole time when I got drafted that I liked it and I didn't love it, but it gave me an opportunity to keep playing something I thought I was pretty good at, and let's see how far I can go with it. But it was, you know, within a month after graduating high school, I was in Spokane, Washington, playing baseball against guys that were a lot better than me. So it's something that humbled me right away. You know, you go from playing in the McDonald's All-American game to the Cap Classic, knowing you're going to play Duke basketball, and then you get drafted at a high point, but then you realize real quick you got a whole lot of work to do on that baseball diamond, especially coming from the state of Alaska. So with this, you know, your seasons aren't that long. It was very humbling. It was a lot of time. The difference in the sports is obviously you go to a basketball gym and the games are 2 hours and your workout is 1.5 hours if you're going hard, and you go to a baseball field and they had me, you know, the game's at 6:05. I had to be there at 2:30 for early work, and then that game doesn't get over with till 9 o'clock, and then you're hitting the road and you're going on a 10-hour road trip, and then you check into a motel, and then you have a couple hours, and then you're back on the diamond again, and if you're there for 2 months and 60 days, you're playing 56 games. So it's a huge commitment in terms of time. But the biggest thing in my 3 years was just being humbled, and you got to do a lot of work, and also trying to fit in some basketball skill work in there too, getting your shots up and getting on the court when you have baseball games every night. So it was definitely challenging, but something that, you know, really stands out in my experiences is something that really humbled me and made me the person that I am today.
And last question about Duke, and then I'm going to hand it over to Donald for the NBA and your post-Duke career. Do you still talk to Coach K very much? And specifically, I want to know, have you talked to him at all about the fact that he's evolved and his team actually plays zone now? Did you guys even practice a zone when you were at Duke?
I don't know that we ever did, aside if we were preparing for another team that played zone. I don't know that we'd ever contemplate playing zone. I think that was back in the Coach K stubborn days, where there's things that we did and we did them because he felt they were right. And obviously he'd won doing things a particular way. So that's the way we're going to do things every day and every game. And we didn't do it right, then we need to do it harder this way. So he obviously has evolved, and I was shocked in watching, you know, the team this year and how much zone that they played. But obviously, you know, Coach is incredibly intelligent. He understands what wins games, and obviously he felt that was the thing that was best for that team this season. So it'll be interesting to see if he does any of that in the season coming up.
So Trajan, we want to transition from your Duke career to your professional career, and transitioning to the NBA. You spent a few years with the Cleveland Cavaliers. What was the biggest adjustment for you going from college to the NBA?
I think it was that in college you have a couple really, really good players on the teams that you play against, and maybe it's the guy you match up against, but if it's not, then it's, you know, let's say, for example, you have a Junior Burrow and a Curtis Staples. Well, maybe Junior Burrow is the NBA player and Curtis Staples is the high-level college player who doesn't quite get to the NBA. And so the NBA player on the teams that you play might not be at your position. And not saying you can take a night off, but the challenge isn't there. So on one team, you might have one player, and then on another team you match up against a Steve Francis, where you have to bring it against a high-level NBA player at your position, but then the next night maybe you don't. You obviously don't have that at the NBA level. You have the best of the best, and instead of guys my size that I'm playing against at my position, you have guys that are, I was 6'3", 6'4". I'm going up against guys mainly that are 6'5", 6'6", and they're the elite athletes and the elite basketball players at that time, at that position. So I think it's the size, the athleticism, the speed, and not only in games, but in practice. Like I go in as a rookie and I'm the third two guard. I'm going against Wes Person and Bob Sura every day trying to earn minutes. So it's not only challenging in games, it's just as challenging in practice going against those guys. You have to bring it every day. And obviously then you're not even talking about the likes of a Kobe Bryant or a Ray Allen that you're matching up against, the all-star type guys. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is getting used to the size and the speed. After that, it's just basketball, and you got to learn that you got to be in elite shape. You got to take care of your body. But fortunately, I had baseball to kind of teach me how to be a professional, so I didn't have to worry about that at that level. But yeah, the athleticism and the size at this level is something that you can't teach until you get here.
Yeah, and I know you played with the Cavs for a few years, and then in 2002 you shifted to playing in Europe. Now, when you shifted to Europe, what was your mindset at that point? Was it, some guys go to play because they want to get back to the NBA, or was it that you thought that it was the best fit for you at the time to play in Europe?
So after my third year in Cleveland, I got invited to go to a mini camp with the Heat, and I think it was July, and must have been late July, and I was there for 3 days. Did 4 sessions in the 3 days. Got a call from Mauricio Gherardini, who was the GM of Benetton Treviso, on the workout after the second day. And I remember him saying, look, we have an opportunity here, really good team. You'd come in here and you would start at the two guard. Everybody else is remaining from last year's team that went to the Euroleague Final Four. And we have a really good coach named Tre Messina. Obviously, all of this is completely new to me, and I was completely oblivious as to who Tre Messina was at the time and how good of a coach he was. So I took all this into accord, and at the end of the conversation, he said, well, look, I'm going to send you a contract tonight, and after your workout tomorrow, you're going to have to make a decision whether you sign it or not, or else we're moving on. So that was kind of a wake-up call for me. Did a little bit of homework, knew I still wanted to be in the NBA, but knew that maybe this was my best chance to get back. And ultimately, my third year in Cleveland, I didn't play a whole lot, so I wanted to play. And that made a huge impact on me signing that contract the next day. I had a really good training camp and spoke with Pat Riley after the practice the next day, and he said, we really like you, we'll invite you to camp, but we can't guarantee you a spot or money. And that just kind of really helped cement the answer to me go ahead and signing that contract. And, my mindset was, well, let's go to Europe and play a year or two and show what kind of player I am and hopefully get back and have a chance to be on an NBA roster again. So that was initially the mindset. Obviously didn't end up panning out, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. Got a chance to meet some amazing people and had an incredible career over in Europe.
But incredible, that's a word to describe it. I think in my opinion, for a lot of people, you're considered a EuroLeague legend. With CSKA Moscow, you won the EuroLeague twice. You were the EuroLeague Final Four MVP. You've been on 2 first-team All EuroLeagues, and I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. I do not think you ever placed second in the Russian league. I think you won every year you were there. Is that correct?
So I won every year that I was at CSKA for 6 years. My first year I was with a team called Dynamo Moscow, and we actually lost to CSKA in the final. So
okay.
That was my only second place final in my 9 years in Europe.
So a couple questions. One, let's go the EuroLeague. The EuroLeague is one of those things that people have put more eyeballs on from the United States in the last few years. But winning the EuroLeague is a big deal. What was it like to win a title in Europe? Basically saying that your team is the kings of Europe. How was that feeling, hoisting that trophy?
So the first one was phenomenal for me just because of what I had gone through and losing at Duke my last year. And then my first year in Italy, we lost in the finals in Barcelona. So it was like kind of a retread that I felt that we were the best team in Euroleague that year, and went into the Final Four in Barcelona having beat Barcelona once and then having lost to them by like 1 or 2 points on their home floor. So we felt even if we got to the final and had to play Barcelona again, we still felt we were the better team. Got to the final against them and got beat. So it almost, reconjured up the same feelings that I had 4 years prior at Duke. And then a couple of years later to get back to that final and actually win it was huge emotions came from that, and felt like you're on the top of the world. The thing that I don't think a lot of people know about Europe is you can go and you can win this European title, but then you got to get your mind right three or 4 days later because you're playing in you're the first round of your domestic league playoffs. So you don't get to celebrate it, go home and do nothing. You have basically 24 hours to celebrate, and then you got to get your head straight, or else you're going to get back and have an emotional low and get beaten and maybe be put out of the playoffs. So, but it was tremendous. And then in Madrid 2 years later, when I was named MVP, obviously another great experience that we were dominant almost that whole year, and then went and finished it off. So two things in my life, two experiences and accomplishments that I'll never forget.
And fast forward to the end of your playing days, you are now in the front office. You became a scout for the San Antonio Spurs. As Jason mentioned, you are now the assistant general manager for the Brooklyn Nets. What's the one trait that you took from your playing days that applies most to your pro basketball career as an exec? And conversely, what has been the biggest transition?
Good questions. I think I've always kind of internally or inherently kind of wanted to lead. I think I did it at the high school level pretty easily because I was one of the better players. I was the best player on the team, and so that was kind of something I just did, whether it was through my everyday work ethic or driving my teammates and being competitive on a daily basis. I think I grew into it at Duke, and I think some of it was with the help of I know some of it was with the help of the coaching staff and some of my teammates, and watching them lead as I got older. And I think in Europe, the more time that I spent there and the more the higher levels that I played at and the more success that I had, I was able to grow into a leadership role, especially at Cisco, and then win championships, being co-captain there, understanding how to manage a locker room, keep us motivated as the year goes along. And I think that is something that I've tried to take into the front office, especially here in Brooklyn, when I've been asked to be the GM of our D-League team in Long Island. Is just, and I kind of oversee our scouting department here, but just try to push the people around me to the greatest of my ability with the knowledge that I have. And we have a really good group here, and but just try to motivate, challenge, and be open with everybody. And it isn't about me, it's about us. And I always felt that was the best way in a team atmosphere too. It's not just about me. Yeah, I can have 20, 25 points, but to make sure everybody else is taken care of too. It's not just about one player. It's about all 5 or all 10 players on the team contributing to a win. And it's the same way in the front office. It isn't just about one person. It's about everybody in that front office coming together and pushing towards the right direction.
All right, so a couple more questions before we wrap up. The first one, what are your long-term plans as an exec? I know you're still very early on in your career as an exec, one that we will probably see for the next few decades, you in a front office. Is there a particular goal you're hoping to achieve now or in the future, or is this something where you're trying to figure out your where you feel your best fit?
I've been incredibly blessed in a lot of ways, and to be able to start off with the San Antonio Spurs, and even as a scout, and see the way that they do things and the way that they treat people and learn their process, And the fact that they allowed me to sit in on a lot of meetings and see the way that they do things and be around the team in the playoff races. And, you know, my first 2 years with San Antonio, we went to 2 finals and won one. And then the year that I was with Cleveland, also be on a championship organization that won another championship. I've been blessed. And then now I've been here and just kind of work through a rebuild and still be part of that and see how that's reshaping the rebuild of the Brooklyn Nets has been a fascinating experience and been something completely different that I've seen in my 2 previous organizations. I'm just taking everything in, learning as much as I can. And, you know, who knows where this goes? I'm in a great place now. I'm really blessed to be here working with the people that I'm with every day. And I'm in no rush to take the next step. Obviously, I think I would love to be a GM at some point, but I have a lot to learn, and I just want to make sure that whatever I do, I'm doing it with great people, with people that can continue to push me and challenge me, and I can do the same with them.
All right. The last question we're going to get you out of here on this one is a question that we ask every guest we've had on the DBR podcast that has ties to the program. It is, what is your favorite Coach K story or your most memorable Coach K story? We've had a lot of great ones. So we've had him using a samurai sword to motivate the guys. We've had him lighting candles in the locker room. We've had a lot of great stories. Give us one for the people. What is your most memorable Coach K story?
So I have one that's most memorable for me personally, but I'm not going to mention that one because I want to do something that he does for the team, because I have heard of some of the things that have been shared with you. I'm sure that a lot of people have said that he's an incredible motivator, which he is. He's also a very smart man, does a lot of reading. And so I think a lot of thought, he's probably up all night the night before games trying to think about how I'm going to motivate my team for this game. And, you know, I've thought about this a lot and kind of went back and visited him a couple times and tried to figure out why he does this thing or how he does it. And, you know, I've thought about it. He'll come in and he can be analytic with his motivation. He can come in and say, you know, we're playing Clemson tonight and these are their players and this is what they like to do and this is what we need to do, and kind of go through player personnel scouting and be kind of systematic with it. Or he can come in and philosophize and say, look, guys, for us to play against this team, the team on the other side, they're like 5 fingers. You know, the thumb is the point guard and he's talented, and the middle finger is the center and he's really good, but they're 5 individuals. And if you go up and hit a wall with those 5 fingers, you're going to break those 5 fingers. We're going to be together as one, like a fist. And even though individually we might not be as talented as a fist, we're going to go hit that wall and we're going to punch a hole through it. We're going to be stronger than those 5 fingers. Or he can come in and take the more athletic, the athletic stance, which I think was always one that motivated me more than anything else. And one that I remember that I think he did on 2 different occasions in my 5 years, where he'll come in and if you see him on the sideline, he's always in this really nice suit and he's got the tie that matches the shirt, matches the belt, matches the shoes. And I remember coming in and didn't have the coat on, and he comes in with this intense look, and he's just like, he would spins the ball around, kind of just shows the basketball to everybody. He's got this tight grip on with his elbows out, and he goes, you see the name on this ball? It says Spalding. And all of us see that. But I want, when you're on the court, that ball in your eyes tonight isn't going to say Spalding. It's going to say Duke. It's going to say Duke. And wherever that ball is, it has to be Duke's ball. And he'd roll the ball on the floor, and he'd dive after it. He'd just dive on the ball, and he'd roll around in his suit and tie, and then he'd get up and say, let's effing go. Let's effing go. This is Duke's ball. And see a guy rolling on the floor, getting after it in his suit and tie. So those are great moments, and moments that I'll never forget. And I mean, talk about the energy in that room and us running out to the court. And I can't remember, whoever we played was in trouble on those nights.
Well, that is awesome. I like the fact that we now have another one. Coach K can get down and dirty before games to motivate the troops.
I bet he doesn't do that anymore.
He probably doesn't. Not as well. Maybe he does. We'll have to get a current player to get that.
It would just take him a little longer. Just take him a little longer to get up now.
Well, Trajan Langdon, assistant general manager for the Brooklyn Nets, and the legend Duke basketball, Alaskan Assassin. Thank you so much for joining us on the DBR podcast. We wish you and the Brooklyn Nets all the best this season. I know it's going to be a great year up there in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center. But thank you very much for joining us, and we will hopefully see you down the road.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
So, guys, wow, that was great. I mean, Trajan was so much fun. I really thought he was thoughtful and insightful. I've got a couple things I want to point out, but Donald, let me get to you first because you were the other guy with me on the call. What are your, what are the things you liked best? What do you find most interesting that Trajan had to talk about?
The one thing that we're always fixated with is Dukies in the NBA, but we've also had Dukies go on to have very successful careers in Europe. And as the guy who probably had one of the greatest European careers of any basketball player, not just Dukies, but any basketball team, I was really interested to hear about his experience in Europe playing for CSKA Moscow. And I loved his answers. I loved how he compared, his thought process behind joining the team, how he was still at first saying, hey, I just kind of want to get back to the NBA. And in the end, decided to stick it out and have a brilliant career. There are players, we talk about Euroleague now because it's something that has popped up, has been a lot more eyeballs on it from American eyeballs over the last few years. And so you hear the name of Torrey Messina, and you hear him and you know who that guy is. He's an assistant coach under Greg Popovich for the San Antonio Spurs, one of the most revered minds in basketball in general. And Trajan Langdon had nothing but great things to say about playing for him. And he said he made him a better player. I think that sort of link is something that we don't get to hear about from professional basketball players. A lot of people don't talk about their European experience, that he had one of the greatest ones and was able to talk about it with such fervor and such passion. I really appreciate it. And I know you're going to talk about it, but the Coach K story with him rolling on the ground, fighting over a basketball with just himself in a suit. That's something that I really wished that I could see in person. And I hope he still does that. But that was a really cool story.
Donald, there is no way he does that. At that time he was only on his first, I think, replacement hip, but now he's got like zero hip. Yeah, he's got zero original hips. There's no way he's rolling on the ground anymore.
So we're gonna need to petition him just to have bionic knees so that he could just go back to doing that and going back to his younger days, because I think some of the younger kids will appreciate him rolling around on the ground and saying, "Let's effing go."
Sam, what about you? You didn't get to join the interview, but you listened to it just a few minutes ago. What did you think?
I thought it was great. So I was telling you guys that Trajan Langdon is a little bit before my time. I've mentioned before, I know that 2001 is like the first season that I really remember as a Duke fan.
Dude,
so
you
Trajan
missed 99.
Oh, I know.
I'm telling you, that's like the most fun season because we beat the crap out of everyone.
Well, and I feel like I sort of prepped for listening to this interview by the interview we did a couple of years ago with Shane Battier, because of course they overlapped for a couple of years and sort of told similar stories. By the way, fans of the show, if you haven't listened to our Shane Battier interview, it was one of the first ones we did. I think it was like the first summer after we started this show, and we had Shane Battier on, and we asked him about being on those teams, and he told us about some of how Coach K would get mad at them for only winning games by 15 points or I remember I called him out for he said some story that started with him saying we had lost 2 games in a row and such, and the rest of the story continued on. And I said, Shane, I just looked at all 4 of your seasons and you never lost 2 games in a row. So it was fun. It was fun listening to these stories because they sort of corroborated a lot of that, right? He was, like he mentioned, that UVA game where they were up by 40 points or whatever, and the coaches took him out early, and he was like, "What's going on?" And it turns out that they were crushing an ACC opponent so badly that they couldn't leave the starters in anymore. So I liked hearing that. I feel like I'm again, because I don't really remember that time, I don't really remember what it was like for Coach K to be holding players to such a high standard that you couldn't even fathom it, right? Like, what was it like to be a Duke player in 1999 or 2000 or 2001 when they were stomping on basically everybody, and the standard was so high that it was basically like being USA Basketball for most of USA Basketball's existence, except of course under Larry Brown, but that mentality that like, we're going to go out there and we are going to beat the hell out of anyone we play. It doesn't matter. And whether that's preparing, as Trajan said, preparing by scouting all the players individually, or just preparing with like a mindset and sort of explaining an overall philosophy for the game. I loved hearing all that. I also feel like I get a better impression of how extreme it was, because Trajan says that was Coach K in his stubborn days. And I know that Coach K is still fairly stubborn in the way that he likes to coach. Obviously, he's introduced the zone the last couple of years, but man, that had to take a lot of pulling on Coach K to think that there was like a time before my Duke memory when Coach K was really considered stubborn. That tells me a lot about sort of the whole state of the program.
It probably hasn't
the last thing. Oh yeah. The last thing that stood out to me was him talking about coming in 1995 and having that disappointing season where they didn't make the tournament. They were under 500, like one of the worst seasons in all of Duke basketball history. And then for him to finish his career in 1999, not quite winning the championship, of course, but making the Final Four and being arguably one of the greatest teams that we've ever seen. And it makes me think about that 2010 team that I love to talk about so much, because that was, of course, when I was in school, and how the class of 2010 started their careers in the 2007 tournament, losing in the first round to VCU, the first time Duke had lost in the first round since I think like the 80s, and them coming, each year getting a little further in the tournament, and their senior years winning the championship. It sort of has that same kind of vibe to it, and arguably is the 99 group that Trajan was part of has an even bigger rise from, just from where they started, where, the program had won or they had been to 7 of 9 Final Fours prior to him arriving on campus. Coach K was a big celebrity. All the Duke guys were celebrities at that point, and to sort of fall on their faces that 95 season so hard, but then pick themselves back up and get back to a Final Four, really speaks to, how tough they all were and how good they all wanted to be. I obviously I can't remember what all those years were like, but that's really cool. And it makes me appreciate even more that 99 team and knowing that those guys came from there.
So the two things that I really took from it, other than the great story about Coach K rolling on the floor, I mean, how fabulous is that one? There were two of his answers that I really enjoyed. The first one was when he talked about how close he still is to lots of his teammates. And he specifically talked about Chris Carrawell, and that they get on the phone and they still, they'll get on the phone, they'll just talk basketball back and forth with each other. I really like that. And you love hearing about, the lifelong bond that these guys form by being teammates. Not surprising. It's not the first time we've heard that kind of thing, but I just enjoy hearing about that. And then the other thing I really liked was he pointed out that, and he said that started in high school, I think, for him, how he always wanted to lead and how that had really driven his career. And one of the reasons was wanting to lead. And one of the reasons he's now moved into, management in the NBA, wanting to lead. And I think it's sort of interesting to me, because Trajan was always perceived, Sam, I know he was before your time, he was perceived as kind of a quiet guy on the floor. He wasn't super demonstrative and emotional and things like that. And
you know what's funny,
times,
Jason?
Yeah.
You know what's funny about that? I told a friend of mine who graduated from Duke in the 90s that we were interviewing Trajan last week, and he said, "Oh, forewarning, it might not be a great interview. He's kind of a quiet guy."
Yeah, exactly. So he has that reputation. I would have said to you prior to us getting this interview that he would be quiet and soft spoken, and he really wasn't. And that's one of the reasons I love it when we get these interviews and we get to talk to these guys in, we learn more about who they really are as a person. And the guy you see on the basketball floor isn't necessarily the guy that they are the other 23 and a half hours of the day, so to speak. And like I said, I just loved his answer about wanting to lead and how that has driven everything he's done. I think it's good advice for all of us that we should take that kind of advice. And again, Trajan, thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of the DBR podcast and for providing us with that insight. And especially thank you for the image of Coach K rolling around the floor trying to grab a basketball. So once again, here on the DBR podcast, we want to thank our faithful sponsors, the guys from Byrd Campbell, your Duke-centric law firm. And I told Tucker Byrd, one of the partners there, that we were going to be interviewing Trajan Langdon, and he wrote this back to me, and I really wanted to read it to all of you, what he feels about Trajan. He said, in the pantheon of Duke basketball heroes, Trajan Langdon stands firmly rooted. He checked all the boxes when it comes to becoming a Duke legend. He stayed for 5 years. He persevered throughout. He became a captain, made it to a Final Four. He was degreed, and he got a math degree, and he earned one of the all-time great nicknames, the Alaskan Assassin. Those one and run players could learn a lesson from Trajan's Duke career, Tucker Byrd says. Play for 1 year, you may get an NBA job. Play a career, and you could build yourself a legacy. Wonderful words there from Tucker Byrd of Byrd Campbell. And once again, we want to thank the guys from Byrd Campbell for being our sponsors here on the DBR podcast. If you have legal needs in Florida or Texas, be sure to reach out to them at byrdcampbell.com, BYRDCAMPBELL.com. Byrd Campbell means business. So guys, I want to play a little bit of a game here. This is what we're going to do next. It has been a long summer. It's pretty much done. Students will be going back to campus very, very soon. And the game I want to play is, what was the most significant thing to happen for Duke basketball this summer? And here's the criteria. I have 3 different things I'm going to toss out for you, and then you guys are going to comment on them, and eventually we will vote, and we will pick the most significant thing to happen to Duke basketball this summer. Nominee number 1, RJ Barrett being the best player on the floor for Team Canada. RJ played for the Team Canada national team in the World Cup qualifiers this summer. He played with multiple NBA players. I'm talking Dylan Brooks, Dwight Powell, Kelly Olynyk, some really good NBA players, established NBA veterans. And RJ not only was starting for that Team Canada team, he led the team in scoring, averaged almost 14 points per game. And most people said he was the best player on the floor almost all the time, playing with legit NBA players. He even says that Canada is ready to beat Team USA in national team competitions. And we remember RJ led Canada to a victory in the, I think it was the under-17 World Championships over Team USA, coached by John Calipari. So that's candidate number 1, RJ Barrett, best player on the floor for Team Canada in the World Cup qualifying. Candidate number 2 for the most significant thing to happen to Duke this summer. We've all talked about it. We've all seen it. Zion Williamson broke the Duke vertical record. They were testing vertical leap at Duke, and Zion reached the highest point on their testing pole. They had to go get an extension pole for him to come out and reach even higher. They didn't release the exact height of his vertical, but it, from all appearances, appears to be greater than 40 inches. And while that's great, what makes it truly shocking is that he did that while having the body of an NFL defensive lineman, 6'7", 285 pounds. The best vertical in Duke history belongs to a guy who is the size of an NFL defensive lineman. Oh my God, he's going to do things that will leave your jaw on the floor. So that's candidate number 2. The third candidate for most significant thing to happen for Duke this summer, an interview with Coach K. And in that interview, Coach K said that he believes that Marquise Bolden will be one of the best big men in the entire country last year. He pointed out that we have not been able to see the real Marquise Bolden because he's been injured in each of the past couple seasons. And he said Marquise has really improved, and he's going to have a huge year. And Coach K predicted that Marquise Bolden would be one of the best big men in all of college basketball this year. Gentlemen, those are your nominees. RJ, best player for Team Canada. Zion, breaking the vertical record. Bolden, one of the best bigs in the country. Sam, I go to you first. What do you think about those?
So I want it to be Marquise Bolden's story because we know about lots of Duke big men in the past who have had injury problems. I think Brian Zubek is the one who stands out the most in that category, coming in as a 5-star recruit, having injuries, a lot of fans thinking, well, like sort of looking past the injuries and just going, well, he's not good. He's not getting on the floor. He's not getting minutes. He's not getting numbers. He must not be all that good. He's not really living up to his recruiting ranking or his hype. We were really excited for Marquise Bolden. I know last summer when we talked about, or 2 summers ago when he was coming in, we talked about him competing for minutes with those other guys like Giles and Tatum, who are now, of course, in the NBA. And I want that to be real. What I fear is that it's Coach K doing some public motivation of Marquise to really, really get him psyched up and excited about his role on this team, because I think he's going to need to step up and play good minutes and be a leader for this young Duke team. So with that said, I think the big story is Zion Williamson. Jason, you emphasized it very clearly. He is bigger than anybody I think we've seen in a Duke uniform. He's like heavier than anybody we've seen in a Duke uniform, and he can jump higher than all of them too. And that is really scary. I mean, we've seen some pretty fantastic dunkers at Duke. The one who I really remember, from the last few years that was so impressive was Miles Plumlee, and just he was so tall, he could get up so high, he could block shots, all that stuff. And Zion Williamson is thicker and apparently can jump higher. So I am scared of the things he's going to be able to do against competition that is all smaller than he is. And this is not a guy who's a leaper who's a little dude. This is a leaper who is massive, and no one's going to want to stand in the way. No one's taking charges from Zion Williamson. He is shoving dudes out of the way. There's a great old GIF of Shaquille O'Neal that pops up on the internet all the time of him dunking. I don't remember who the center is that he dunks and shoves the guy to the ground all in one motion. I want to see Zion Williamson. What was it?
Chris Dudley.
Chris Dudley,
who promptly took the ball and threw it chucked it down the court at Shaq, and I believe got a technical, or I don't think he got ejected, but he definitely got a technical for it while screaming "F you" at Shaq.
Zion Williamson's going to do that to Luke May, and it's going to be like one of the greatest moments of my life. So I think while I want the Bolden thing to be the biggest thing, I think it's going to be Zion Williamson and just what a force he's going to be at the college level.
Donald?
So I think I know what Jason's going to talk about. And I'm not going to spoil it for everybody. So I am going to talk about exactly what Sam just talked about. Zion Williamson, I think that is the most significant thing and here's why. He is already a YouTube sensation. He's a cultural phenomenon. And now that he is listed at a weight that is 5 pounds lighter than the heaviest player in the NBA and is still breaking vertical leap records in college, and he hasn't started yet. This is the great thing about him. Like, when you look at Zion Williamson and you look at the fact that everyone thought that he's just a dunker. Here's another thing. When you're looking at his mass, in college, entering college, he's 6'7", 285. When he left high school, he was 6'7", 270, and people were worried about his conditioning. They were also saying he has to lose a little weight, and by getting into a college program of weightlifting and strength and conditioning, that he was going to lose a lot of weight and that he'd probably be about 245, 240. He put on 15 pounds of muscle on a frame that everyone thought was already big, but I think what it does is it just kind of blows your mind as to how big this guy really is and how athletic he still is, how he has not lost his touch, how he's improved his shooting.
Donald, can you believe what happens if it turns out he's good at playing defense?
That's what I'm saying.
If you're not going to be able to get around a guy that size,
if he's just imagine what that does for an offense and a defense. On offense, if he sets himself up on the block, that's his block. You're not going to move him out of the paint.
Charles Barkley style, right?
Yeah, if he establishes his position And I know he already has great footwork. So that is something that we don't think is going to be an issue, right? Like he's going to be a guy that is a presence on the court. He already has the attention. And honestly, he's still going to get his points. You've seen him in some of these Duke Blue Planet videos. He gets the ball in the paint and jumps over 7-footers and jams in their face. And apologies to Tony Vrekovic, but sir, are you doing okay? Because I saw that video the other day, and man, he has an elevator that is 3 floors higher than everyone else on the planet. And I say that including NBA players. He is in a Duke basketball uniform. That has me so freaking excited for the season.
Well, and sorry. There is no question that Zion Williamson is going to be the most explosive player to ever put on a Duke uniform. And I mean, think about how many great players we have had. He is probably going, in terms of pure athletic specimen, he's almost certainly number one, which is scary because, I mean, Corey Maggette, Grant Hill, there have been a lot of Dukies that were just crazy, ridiculous athletes. And Zion's going to be number one. But as Donald already said, I believe the most significant thing that happened this summer was RJ Barrett and what he did for the Canadian national team, because that was not competing against high schoolers. That was not competing against college guys. He was competing against men, adults who in many cases are in the NBA or who play professional basketball, elsewhere in the world. And he was the best player on the floor. Just think about that for a minute. I mean, it's almost unreal to imagine that an 18, 19-year-old kid, let's not forget that he reclassified. He should have been class of 2019. He came to Duke a year early, class of 2018 instead. High school class, of course. This is a kid who at 18, 19 years old was better than established NBA veterans, guys who are making many, many $1 million per year. And I want to put it in some real perspective for you. In Duke basketball history, there have been 3 players who were the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. Art Heyman did it in 1963, and I'm not going to tell you I know anything about Art Heyman's NBA career. I'm old, I'm not that old. But the 2 who've done it recently that we can relate to and remember are Elton Brand and Kyrie Irving. Elton Brand in 1999, Kyrie Irving in 2011 were both the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. And think about how dominant, how great they were in college. They seem to be on a different level from everyone else. And there is no question. I've spoken to some guys who are involved in the NBA scouting game a little bit. I've got some friends, some people who know this stuff. They say there's absolutely no question that RJ Barrett is going to be the number 1 pick in next summer's NBA draft. He's going to join Kyrie and Elton Brand as recent guys who were the top pick in the draft from Duke University. Jay Williams wasn't number 1. Jason Tatum wasn't number 1. Brandon Ingram wasn't number 1. I can go down the list on and on and on of Duke players, great Duke players who weren't that good, weren't good enough to be the number 1 overall pick. RJ Barrett will be. And these NBA guys that I've spoken to said what he was doing in these world championship qualifying games was unreal. They've never seen a high schooler, let alone a guy who'd been in college for a year, but even a guy who's never been to college. They've never seen one do what he was doing playing against grown men. And I think he is going to be absolutely unreal for Duke. He's going to be borderline unstoppable. And I'm just really excited about it. So I think that's the most important thing. All right, guys. So we've talked about the most significant thing to happen this summer. The real most significant thing that's going to happen comes up next, which is that Duke is playing during the summertime. We are going on a Canadian tour. August 15th, 17th, and 19th, Duke will be playing Ryerson, University of Toronto, and McGill. You are forgiven if you are not familiar with those 3 teams. So I'll tell you a little tiny bit about each one of them. Ryerson is probably the best program in all of Canada. They play in the Canadian National Championship tourney virtually every year. Last year, they played for the title, and they only lost by 2 points in the championship game. Their head coach, Roy Rana is really involved with Canadian basketball, national basketball, and he's coached RJ Barrett in the past. So RJ knows him really well. So Ryerson's who we play first. We then play University of Toronto. They're not nearly as good. They only were like 13-11 in Canadian basketball play last year, and they don't really play many NCAA schools. We're probably going to absolutely destroy them. They don't have anyone on their team who's more than like maybe 6'8". I don't even want to imagine what Zion Williamson is going to do to the University of Toronto. And then our last game is against McGill, which is another one of the very top programs in Canada. They play a lot of NCAA teams. It's going to be real interesting to compare scores. The week before they play us, they play both Ole Miss and Cincinnati. And later in the year, they'll be playing St. Mary's and Harvard. So McGill really makes a practice of playing NCAA teams, and they compete with them. Last year, McGill beat UTEP twice, and they played SMU, and they played a really close game against SMU. And that SMU team last year was pretty good. They probably would have been like right on the bubble for the tournament if they'd been eligible, if Larry Brown hadn't made them ineligible. So those are the three opponents we're going to have. But the big thing I want to ask you guys, what are you going to be looking for? What should we? I mean, Duke's going to win all three of these games. It would be a huge shock if we didn't win them by 20 plus points. Even against the best teams in Canada like Ryerson and McGill. Donald, I'll go to you first. What is there one stat or one thing you're really going to be looking for in these three games in Canada?
Yeah, sure. I think the one thing that I'm going to be looking for is really two things, is how we line up, our starting lineup, and our rotations, because I think that's the first chance for fans to kind of see what these competitions are all about, that they're, battling in practice, who is starting, and it's not necessarily something where we can look at a starting lineup against Ryerson and go, that's obviously going to be the starting lineup on opening night against Kentucky. But I think we can look at that and kind of see where Coach K's head is at as how he wants to employ all these guys, and also the rotations. Does he have a big lineup? Does he have a small lineup? Does he, play RJ and Zion both in the middle? Does he play Cam Reddish with those guys? Is it going to be 4 freshmen and Marquise Bolden? I think that is what we're going to see a lot, is we're going to see a lot of tinkering of the lineups, and we're going to try and see where the coaching staff's head is at with regards to how these guys work together and what kind of, rotations we can see. So that's really what I'm looking for.
I think the thing that interests me that, Donald, you didn't mention at all is Tre Jones. And Duke has had a few recent point guards, specifically Kyrie Irving and older brother Tyus Jones, who have been really good, really great point guards sort of right out of the gate for them. They've also struggled with some freshman point guards. Derek Thornton, Trayvon Duval have both had their struggles as freshmen at Duke. And so I am looking at Tre Jones to see how well he distributes, how well he shoots, how calm he is. Again, as Jason said, it's not like Duke is expected to play close games against these teams, but I want to know kind of what sort of talent we're getting in Tre Jones. The thing that I am concerned about as far as like fan expectations go is assuming that Tre Jones is just going to be Tyus Jones 2.0. That might happen, and that would be wonderful. We all remember all the big shots he took and the big plays he made, but it's sort of unfair, even for a guy of his talent level, to just expect that Tre Jones jumps in and takes the reins of this team this quickly. I think patience watching him at first is going to be important. The other thing that I'm interested in is who's shooting the ball for Duke, especially from outside. We know that Cam Reddish comes in with a shooter's ability. We know that Alex O'Connell is probably on the bench, but has that in him. He made some big shots for Duke last season, and we saw those glimmers. We know that those guys are both going to be good enough to get big minutes for this team. So I want to know how many shots each of them is taking from outside, and who it seems like the go-to scorers are on the perimeter, because we know that inside there's a lot of talent. We know that Zion Williamson's going to get the ball. We know that RJ Barrett's going to get the ball, that Duke's going to have a lot of size to throw around. I want to see how they attack on the perimeter, because ultimately that's how teams have been winning the last few years. Villanova last year, great example of, they had big men, but a lot of the scoring comes from the outside.
Well, Sam, you took the thing I was going to look for. I mean, like we said, Duke's going to win these games by 20, 30, probably 40 points. And in terms of size, Ryerson has a guy who's 7'2" from Senegal. He's not great, but I mean, he at least is 7'2". But other than that, these teams aren't putting big men out there who are taller than maybe 6'7" or 6'8". And so Duke's going to own the boards. I expect Bolden and Delorier will grab a ton of rebounds, have a ton of putbacks, and look really good, and probably inflate our expectations way beyond where they should be on those guys. The thing that I'm really looking
as
for,
is tradition, and that is tradition for every exhibition game. I think we've said it every year. Exhibition games ignore rebounding numbers, especially from the reserves. They are not real.
But you hit on it. The thing I'm going to be looking for is the 3-point shooting, because that's something that isn't super dependent on the quality of the opponent. I mean, look, I know some teams are better at closing out and defending threes, and some of these opponents that are not as quick and not as good probably are going to let us get more uncontested threes. But I'm really eager to see who's taking and who's making 3-pointers for us, because come the regular season, teams are going to be really packing it in to stop Zion Williamson and stop RJ Barrett from getting and operating in the lane. Those two guys, when they get in the lane, forget about it. You're in terrible trouble. They're going to score. They're pretty much unstoppable in there. So teams are going to want to pack it in. And I want to see who on Duke is able to take and make 3-pointers. And we should mention, there's a whole thread on the board about this. If you don't go to the DBR boards, you've been missing out on it. There's a thread about Jack White, who apparently has been absolutely scalding, lighting it up from 3-point range in his shooting this summer. They've been doing some organized drills. They've been keeping track of exactly how many shots everybody takes and makes and things like that. And Jack White has some sick numbers. Now, look, there's a reality here that Jack White is not going to play 20 minutes a game for Duke this year. I bet he's not going to play even 10 minutes a game for Duke this year. But if he's playing 7 minutes a game and he's shooting 2 or 3 3-pointers in those 7 minutes, that could be a significant thing for Duke. So I'm going to be on the lookout for 3-pointers and 3-point percentage and who is taking the threes.
Jason, you're looking for at least one, top half of the ACC team's SB Nation board to be littered with. Wait, who the hell is Jack White after one game this season?
Yes. I think that would be very nice and very fun. I would look forward to that. I hope that happens. All right, guys, we're moving on to parting shots. It has been a packed podcast again. My goodness, we have so much to say. Donald, I will go to you first. Give me your parting shot.
This is something that I saw on Twitter this morning, and I had to bring it as my parting shot because I thought it was
so great. This is so
incredible. The Danny Berry at the Danny Berry on Twitter. And I'm just going to give you the first tweet of the thread, and then we'll discuss the thread. It says, "I now present ACC football teams as fast food restaurants. Disclaimer: Bojangles is not involved in this list. Sorry, John Swafford." And he proceeds to go through every single team in the ACC for football and talk about them very quickly in a tweet, talk about them and what kind of restaurant they represent.
Some of these are brilliant. Some of these are so great.
Yeah, I want to go through a couple for the fans out there. You can check it out, but I'm going to go through a couple that I thought were my favorites. Florida State. You might dislike them for ethical reasons, but you can never deny how good they are. They're Chick-fil-A. Perfect. Brilliant.
I mean, that's it. That's exactly how I feel about Florida State football.
So
exactly.
Perfect.
Like when
and
Jameis
Chick-fil-A.
Winston
And Chick-fil-A.
and Chick-fil-A.
Louisville came out of nowhere and were solid for a while. Everyone thought they'd stick it out with the best of them, but then they were marred by a scandal that slowly taken them down. They're Chipotle. Bruh. Just incredible.
As somebody who subsisted on Chipotle for most of my senior year of college and now eats it maybe once a month, man, that hits so close to home.
Yep. And this one right here, Georgia Tech, disclaimer, there's some language in this one. They run the same plays. They run the same 3 plays in a variety of formats. Also, the day after playing them, you feel like shit. They're Taco Bell. Just cancel me. Just cancel me. But I want to get to the Duke one because I also thought it was pretty appropriate.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. Those are the best. Those
are the best ones by far. But the Duke one, I have to do the Duke one. They technically play football, but everyone just goes for the basketball. They're Dairy Queen. And we were talking about this. I think it was you, Sam, who didn't get the reference of why that would be a Dairy Queen reference. Was that you that did that?
Yes.
Yeah. I over my head.
Yeah. So basically, Dairy Queen is an ice cream joint. It is not a fast food joint. It's an ice cream joint. They serve food, but they're an ice cream joint. No one goes for the burger. They have all these commercials about them having burgers and hot dogs and everything else. It's Dairy Queen. We're not going for the burgers. We're going for the ice cream. So basically what this is saying is, yeah, they play football. They may have football, but everyone, and I don't think the fans, I think it's other people. They want to go for the basketball team. So I think it's one of those things where I appreciate the fact that they think Dairy Queen, but I hope that our guys can play like more than Dairy Queen this year. I think they could play like some of the better teams in the ACC if they play well. So but I do think if you guys haven't seen this, it was something that was posted this morning. It's absolutely hilarious. A lot of them will make you laugh for several minutes. And there's one I want to end with, and it's Notre Dame. Notre Dame, absolutely everywhere. Their fans permeate every city they're in. Not technically part of the ACC. Way better local alternatives exist. They're Starbucks. Just that's perfect.
Drop
this whole
the mic.
thing is perfect.
Yep. That guy is so funny, and it's so on target.
Yeah, every one of these.
And I would say, even though Donald read a lot of what I think will be the favorite ones, you have to check out the whole thread because A, it's all great, and B, it comes with gifts. And some of them are also the Georgia Tech one is great. So,
I'm
check that out.
I'm looking at it right now. It's absolutely hilarious.
Let me share my parting shot real quick. I was walking around Duke's campus today, and I was actually showing my.
You're bragging that you're at Duke, aren't you?
Well, yeah, no. Well, I'm bragging about Duke. I was showing my roommate around, and he didn't go to Duke for undergrad. He is in my program, but I was pointing at all these different buildings and saying like, oh, this is whatever such and such building. It's new, or it's been very recently renovated, or oh, it looks like they're renovating this. I didn't even know. So if you haven't been back to Duke anytime recently, there is like so much new stuff everywhere. And so I encourage you to come back and visit because it doesn't look like what you remember, even if you graduated like 3 years ago. So come on back to campus, check it out, and say hi.
And Sam has a couch you can sleep on. Sam has told me that anyone who listens to the podcast can sleep on his couch for free. Is that correct, Sam?
I have not said any such thing. But I look forward to, I don't know, meeting some podcast listeners or, something maybe a little bit more benign than that. But I don't know, maybe, you never know where friendships will come from.
I'm kidding. Guys, so my parting shot is this. Are you all familiar with the basketball tournament?
Oh
yes.
The 3-on-3?
TBT?
No.
I'm watching a lot of it.
The TBT. It concludes in the next couple days. We'll probably get this podcast up in time before it's all finished. They are down to a Final Four at the basketball tournament. If you're not familiar with it, it is a 5-on-5 winner-take-all tournament with first prize, the only prize, winner-take-all, is $2 million. That is not insignificant amount of money.
And up from $1 million. It started as a $1 million winner-take-all.
It actually started at $500,000. Now it's up to $2 million. Almost all the games are broadcast on ESPN, and this is not like scrubs from who knows where. Most of these teams are comprised of former college teammates or guys who went to the same school. So, for example, one of the teams in the Elite Eight was called Boeheim's Army, and they were all guys who went to Syracuse. We're talking like Hakeem Warwick, Eric Devendorf. I mean, these are guys who were Syracuse stars. They lost to the Golden Eagles, who were guys who played for Marquette. Jimmer Fredette, remember the great Jimmer? He has a team that's still alive. They beat a team of former Ohio State players in the Elite Eight, including Jared Sullinger and Greg Oden. We have a Greg Oden sighting. Greg Oden was playing in the basketball tournament. There was a St. John's team, a Memphis team, a team from Wake, UCLA, Georgetown. So why is there no Duke team? I mean, I get that the current Duke NBA guys are not going to risk injury to play for $2 million. It doesn't matter to them. And I get that there's some Dukies who are trying to make it to the NBA, who are playing in the G League and things like that, who again, wouldn't want to risk injury. But I mean, come on. How about Ryan Kelly or Nolan Smith, guys who went out of the NBA before they really wanted to, who are still in their prime? Josh Hairston, who's playing over in Europe. Come on back for a little bit, Josh, and play in this tournament. Daniel Ewing, Dante Jones, recently retired. Andre Dawkins, Tyler Thornton. What about Gerald Henderson? Gerald, show the NBA that you're still an NBA player. How is it not a thing that there's a Duke team for the basketball tournament? I'd be watching this thing like the whole way, 100%. We've got to make this happen. Dukies, if you know a former Dukie who is not playing in the NBA, tell him right now they need to form K's Army or whatever you want to call it. There has to be a Blue Devil team in next year's basketball tournament.
I love it. I think it'd be great. I think the real issue is that most of our players that would participate in TBT are still in the NBA. So
yeah, we're too good. That's the problem.
We're too good for the TBT, and you know what? I will take that.
Yeah, still. But
this episode has been heavy on the Duke hubris. I'm enjoying it. So, thank you, Jason, for bringing that to our attention. That I think I was like vaguely aware that existed, but I've never like consumed any the basketball tournament content. So maybe it's finally time to start.
I'll say, by the way, that I think that branding a lot of these teams and tying these teams to universities makes me care a heck of a lot more. Because there are a number of guys whose names I recognize and I go, oh yeah. I mean, if you just had guys on random teams, it doesn't matter to me. When you tell me that Jared Sullinger and Greg Oden are playing on an Ohio State team, if I'm an Ohio State fan, I'm like, I'm tuning in for every one of those. That's why I want Duke to have a team. And
that sort of gets to a lot of the like higher argument about all of college sports and what it's worth and who, a lot of the discussion around the sport is you would watch even this, which is not a college basketball game, because it's affiliated with Duke. There's a lot to be said about what you just stated.
Amen. Absolutely. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here on DBR podcast number 122. Once again, I want to thank one of the all-time greats, one of the best shooters in Duke history, Trajan Langdon, for joining us on this podcast. Trajan, we really enjoyed having you on. Best of luck to you in your NBA general managing career. And I want to thank Donald and Sam for joining with me once again. We'll be back in a couple weeks after Duke has played their games in Canada. We'll be giving you a full recap of everything we saw. You heard what we're hoping to see. Hopefully we will see it. For Sam and Donald, I am Jason. DBR podcast number 122 in the books. Thanks a lot, folks. Duke Band, it's your turn. Take us home.